All right, what's up? It's Brandon here, and today we got Lucas White. Lucas is a good friend of mine. Man, I met Lucas several years ago through Indiana State. Great dude, great strength coach, even better person. We got some really good questions here for you today, Coach. So thanks for coming on, and how are things doing?
Oh, man, I appreciate you having me. This is awesome. Anytime we get a chance to, sit and chop it up about training, I'm always down. No, everything's been going good. Like I said, we got our first game here in a couple of days. We kick off at 1 o'clock on Saturday. So, it has been a really good year. Been really good. Winter was great. Spring ball was awesome. We had a really good fall camp. Summer was nice. So we're really excited to watch our guys play Saturday. But yeah, everything's all good here.
Awesome. So, so anybody that's new here, I guess, let us know how you got into strength and conditioning. Kind of your journey, and then the pit stop that you've had to get to where you're at now, which is with Iowa State.
Yeah, sure. No, so I started as a high school coach back in 2013, I think. Yeah. So really, even back before then, I played multiple sports in high school, middle school, all that, and I think the weight room was just somewhere that I tended to gravitate towards a little bit more so, and had some success in there individually. At least I thought, and I always enjoyed it a little bit more than actually playing the sport, that I was in at the time. So, just thought it'd be a really cool deal to try to find a way to shape and mold my life around, something that I thought was, worthwhile, and that was training and the pursuit of strength. So, yeah, so when I was in high school, got done playing ball, and I didn't really want to go play at the college level, but I still trained. And then once I got through undergrad and, I started to kind of think about, career wise, what would I want to do? I had the opportunity to go back to Wrights High School in Evansville, Indiana, where I'm originally from, and had a chance to go do like a practicum, like 150 hours, I think total is what I had to do to graduate undergrad. And from there, just I happened to be in the right place at the right time. There was a coaching change, and Andy Hape was the new guy that came in and said, I'd like to keep you around. I think you do a good job, and this is something that that we don't have to, the coaching staff and I don't have to worry about. We feel good with you down there. We trust you. And that was really how I got a chance to start to get the first 3 years of training, at least coaching anyways, in the strength and conditioning setting, under my belt. So I started at FJ Wrights High School in Evansville, did that for 3 years. And then after that, it was January of 2016. I went to Mississippi State University down in Starkville, Mississippi, as an unpaid intern. Worked that for about 6 months, from January to June. And then I ended up with an opportunity to go out to New Mexico State University from August of 16 to January or July of 2018, I believe. I had a really good opportunity to work with football, track and field, cross country, baseball, softball, men's basketball, both men's and women's golf. I mean, you name it, I had a chance to coach it out there. Had a really awesome 2 years, out in the desert with a great staff and a great group of kids. So after that is whenever I went to Indiana State as a grad assistant, and that's where you and I linked up in August of 18. So I was there for probably August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. I was there for probably about like 8 months, about 8 months or so, and then I had an opportunity to go out to San Jose State. Spent 2 years there, working football, men's and women's soccer. Did some work with track and field as well, and helped with baseball a little bit here and there. But again, really good experience out in the Bay Area in California. It's where I met my fiance at. So she's tagged along for the last two moves. Somehow I convinced her to roll with me out of such a
Yep.
nice place. Yeah, but now anyway, so after San Jose State, had the chance to go to Boise State. We spent 2 years there with the staff that I'm with, or a handful of guys that I'm with now at Iowa State. But I had a chance to work just football only, in a really good football conference. Got a chance to stay in the Mountain West, work at arguably one of the more recognizable programs over the last 25 to 30 years. So had a really good experience there. Got a chance to work with a lot of great guys, a lot of great football coaches, great strength coaches. And then when late December, early January, came around, I got the opportunity to come with my boss, and the rest of our staff over to Iowa State. And so again, we've been here since January of 23. So January of this year, we're just working football. So that's how I got into it, and that's been the couple pit stops along the way. Seems like my
Yep.
tour of state schools is never ending.
Yeah. I mean, it's been cool to watch your journey just since we met at Indiana State. Watching you level up through the ranks, I think that's awesome to see, and I think it really says a lot about you as a strength coach. I mean, taking what you can get, the best opportunity you got, and then just leveling up from it every step along the way. I mean, I think a lot of people would like to say, hey, when you want to become a strength coach, you want to be at a Power 5 school, Big 10, Big 12, which, I mean, conference realignment's getting a little crazy, but,
Yeah.
those are the schools that people want to coach at, that, usually you got more resources and more options available to you, which kind of leads me to my next question. Going from the smaller schools like New Mexico State or San Jose State. I really don't like to link Boise as a smaller state, but they're
Yeah.
technically not a Power 5 school, even though, like you mentioned, they've got good football history. But now you're at a Power 5 school. So for you, like, what's the major difference that you see for anybody that's not been in those rooms? I think a lot of people think that there's a big difference, which there can be, but some people think that there's not a lot of difference. You kind of hear conflicting things on whether you'd much rather be at a smaller D1 or a bigger D1. I mean, you've obviously kind of been to all of them. So, I mean, what have you noticed the difference? And then, anybody that wants to get into the collegiate side, what are your recommendations for that? I think your path that you've had has been good, but, explain kind of what you did, I think might be pretty helpful.
Yeah, no. So I think to go like the first question with with like the biggest difference. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think the resources, that you have available to you are going to be, greater. The higher you go. Now, I'll say this. Um, when you kind of look at training, right, and you look at weight rooms across the country. I mean, a lot of places are going to have a lot of the same things, but the room that we have right now at Iowa State is hands down the most impressive room that I've ever stepped foot in a college setting. I mean, I've told you before. I mean, we've got 18 racks, and one half is a monolift electric jack, and the other half is just a normal half rack to bench and squat in. But the space is great. The amount of equipment we have is unmatched. The type of bars that we have, I mean, we have is every last thing you could imagine, down there in the weight room. But I think when you look at resources, and I think this is something too where a lot of people hear resources, from the strength and conditioning, side of things. It's a weight room. It's what does the field look like? I mean, no, to me, that goes into sports medicine, and just as important, I think the biggest catalyst is nutrition. Our fourth floor in our Stark Performance Center is an absolute gold mine of opportunity to to grow and recover and adapt from the training that our guys go through. So, like, kind of the way we look at it is you go down, you lift, you run, all that. All the physical training is just setting the stage and giving our guys an opportunity, to adapt and recover to the stimulus that they're being provided. So, I think that's the biggest difference when you go from like FCS to Group of 5 up to P5. Kind of where we're at now. I think the biggest thing is from a nutrition standpoint, it is unmatched. I mean, the quality of food, the amount of food, the availability of it for our kids, not only on the fourth floor, but also down in our fueling station down, close to the weight room. I mean, it is like there is every last thing you could think of, we have available for our players to use, pre-training, post-training, during training. If we get a day where it's really hot, guys are straining really hard, and it's like, man, okay, we've still got a little bit to go, whether we're at practice or we're in the middle of the lift and run. We've got things to give our guys to make sure that we can keep training at a pretty good clip. So biggest thing to me is going to be resources, but I think mainly it's going to be the nutrition aspect of it. And I'll say this too, just because a place may have a lot of physical resources, you have to have the right type of people within the walls to make everything go and make it run smoothly. And I think that from top to bottom, from our strength staff up to our football staff, up to our nutrition staff, and then our sports medicine staff, everyone that's in that building, that has a chance to touch and impact our players. We have elite human beings in that building. I mean, absolutely fantastic men and women that do a great job and are there to help serve our players. So from a resource standpoint, I mean, I think that is the biggest difference you're going to see. And I think it is a glaring difference. Second thing, kind of as far as like how to get up into this field. I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't play college sports. I mean, I called it after high school, and I think if you've spent time, whether you played football or baseball, basketball, whatever, if you spend time as a college athlete, I think one, that's going to help you at least understand maybe the day-to-day kind of what that looks like. But to be quite honest, I mean, use your resources. Like the Strength Scoop on footballscoop.com is a really good resource to use. Looking for unpaid internships, the CSCCa website. There are all sorts of different pages. I know Strength Coach Job Network on Instagram usually posts a lot of
Yep.
internships as well. So the resources are there to branch out and start to see, hey, like, if I want to do this and I want to do this at a certain level, be ready to volunteer your time. Because the amount of people, I mean, shoot, man, we had, just this last winter, man, I think we had, or I mean, just this last summer, I think we had like 5 unpaid interns, and they all did a great job for us. But I mean, that's not unheard of. I've heard of some places where you'll have up to 6, 7, 8, some places, 10 plus interns. And it's like, it's a very popular field. But at the same time, I think a lot of people want to get into it and they start to see the day to day. And it's like, oh, well, this isn't as glamorous or as cool as it looked, from the outside. But if you get up into it and you can kind of take the, the day-to-day grind, it's like, hey, if I still find this really cool, really attractive, like you'll be cut out for it. So biggest thing, like, use the resources, available to you as far as trying to find where some of those unpaid internships may be, and just get out of your comfort zone, take a leap, and go in head first 1,000 miles an hour. And I think a lot of people will be surprised at where they'll end up, because one, they'll either end up in the position that they want them set, that they see themselves ending up in down the road, or two, they'll figure out, hey, maybe this is not for me. Maybe I should probably go, maybe private sector or high school or tactical. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I think the amount of growth that's been happening in our field over the last, I bet 5 to 8, maybe 10 years, even now is awesome to watch. And it just gives a lot more opportunities for coaches to kind of find, where they fit in and where they feel their skill set is going to be used most effectively. And that way they can do what they love to do, but at the same time, they can, have a really good opportunity, to make a really good life for themselves. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing you can do to kind of get in, is find a place, volunteer your time, and figure out, like, hey, if this is where I fit in, great. If not, there's other options.
Yeah, I think that's really good because I mean, like you said, I've done some internships at the collegiate level, and I really liked it. But for me, it was I kind of resonated a little bit more with the private sector. I liked being in the collegiate. The energy is awesome. I think that's one thing. Like if you're a high energy person, college weight room is where to be. I mean, that's just that it's high energy all the time when you're in there. You can never be a dud day. You've got to keep these kids motivated and on the right track. Where the private sector can be a little more laid back, but you've also got people that are paying for your time, so that they genuinely want to be there. So you don't only have to ride them as hard. You still got to motivate them and coach them and do all that great stuff. But you're getting somebody that's committed financially. Like they're 100% all in because they're paying for your services. We're like, being in the college weight room, that a lot of those guys are there for football. The strength conditioning portion is a means to an end. I think you've said it really well too. Listen to some of your stuff other places that there's not squat racks out on the field or anything. We're trying to get them better at their sport, and that's how we're designing training programs and whatnot to get them ready for that. If their squat goes up, their bench goes up, that's great as a metric. But if their on-field performance isn't getting better, then we need to reevaluate what we're doing. And at the college level, some of those kids literally just want to play football. Like that's all they want to do. And you're just trying to keep them healthy and whatnot. So they're motivated clearly on the field side, but they may not be as motivated in the weight room side. So I think that's another piece of it. But, I think another thing too that's great is that when you're looking at the college side of things, you've got all those kids. Managing a room is completely different. So if you don't want to figure out how you have to manage a facility with, I don't know how you guys run your guys' teams, if everybody's coming in at once or you guys are working with bigs at 1 hour. I'm sure it kind of changes a little bit, but let's just say all 80 guys are in there. How you got your weight room organized is going to depend on how you rate your training program. You can't do everything you want to do because you got to get 80 guys in and out in 60 minutes. You got to be really efficient with your time. Where the private sector, if you're only working like I am, sometimes it's only 3 or 4 kids in at a time. We got a lot of space and a lot of stuff. I can program pretty much whatever I freaking want because we ain't going to have to worry about weight room logistics. You can use what you need and we can get done what we need to. I think that's a little bit different as well. But that kind of gets me to the next thing is I've also seen you go from working with other sports to now you're football only. So I think this is definitely it seems like where strength and conditioning is going to have that football only staff, and then what they would say the Olympic staff or the other sports, sometimes just basketball only as well, I think is kind of coming up a little bit too. But what's the biggest changes that you've had to make going from working with multiple sports to just being football only every single day, 12 months out of the year?
I mean, as far as like changes necessarily to make, so like when I got into it, I always looked at, down the road long term. Like I would love to be a head guy at a major, FBS college football program, right? So I think when you get up into the field, it's kind of like, okay, like you have this vision of where you want your career to go, and where you want to end up at some point. But as far as necessarily changing anything, I didn't really change anything as far as like about me, about how I would coach, about how I plan and program. If anything, when I got up in, it was like, I spent 3 years as a high school guy, and so I start to get up into college and it's like, oh, there are all these different dynamics, that a lot of people don't, like they're not taught that in a traditional, undergraduate or graduate course. As far as, like you hit the nail on the head, as far as like your, the time you have allotted, what you have to get done that day, size of the group, the environment, the type of equipment you have available, the space you have available. There are all different deals that go in. As far as like when you look at planning, you look at what do you put on paper, what do you have time for? What's going to be the one I hate to even say it is like a catchphrase, almost like bang for your buck, but it's like, what are the big rocks that we need to get moved today? And then what can we kind of hold off towards, the back end of the week, or what can we kind of save for another day, So I think as far as like the biggest difference, I haven't really had to change so much about myself, but going to football only, what you will see is that, again, like you talked about just a minute ago, you were talking, you introed this question was, the size of the staff. I mean, when we got to Boise, there were three of us, and now we've got a full staff of five. And so I think one of the biggest things is that some of those responsibilities within a lift can get delegated. And so that gives coaches that are on the floor, it gives you an opportunity to zone in. Okay, here's what I have to take care of within, say, I've got, 5 racks with 2 to 3 guys, per rack. I'm not going to necessarily be worried about maybe someone has like a, like a wrist or a hand or an elbow, or, hey, you've got like an ankle that's screwed up. Hey, guess what? We've got, the weight room section off to 4 different, areas. Okay, cool. We've got a 5th coach, and we may have, an intern with him for an extra set of hands. Great. Any guys that have like some major modifications, cool. You guys roll with that coach, and we've got space, cornered off and available for those guys, to get work done as effectively and quickly as we can, and keep them involved within the group dynamic and within the group setting. So I think that's probably been the biggest thing is to realize, hey, like you don't have to do everything at once. Like you don't have to juggle all these different deals. Like if you've got people that can handle different roles within that environment, then great. That allows you to zero in and hone in on, hey, here's what's going on. Here are my responsibilities within this lift, and let me focus in and make sure that I'm on point, that I'm taking care of my players, or taking care of our players as best as I possibly can, my ability. So I think that's a big one big difference. And two, within my responsibility within the weight, within our staff has been, primarily weight room, as far as, getting with Coach Keggy, who's our head strength coach, getting with him, getting with the rest of the staff, talking about, hey, here's what we're kind of thinking for this week, and kind of looking, 3, 4, 5, 8 weeks down the road. Like, what does this look like? Make sure we're on the same page, but making sure that they've got, what they need before we step on the floor. Do you have your number sheets? Do you have your lift cards? Do we have, is everything set up like that way the flow of the weight room and traffic can move, seamlessly and effortlessly. But I think at the end of the day, it's just going to be the size of the staff that, they will have to keep in mind. And and I don't mean to say it in a bad way. I mean, that's a great thing. The more coaches you can have on the floor and the more people you can have to impact our players, I think is awesome.
Oh yeah.
So again, that allows you to be more effective at what you do, because you don't feel like you've got, a million different things that you've got to account for and you have to feel responsible for, within a lift or a run or what have you. So yeah, definitely staff size is a big deal. And we're very fortunate to have a great staff. And honestly, I mean, with the staff that I've worked with, for the better part of going 3 years now, and then, it was me and Reed Keggy, Brandon Piatzek, and Jalen Baker over at, Boise State. And then when we got to Iowa State, we had a chance to pick up Trevor Ryan, who was played here at Iowa State, back when my boss was an assistant here, several years ago. So a guy that we were very fortunate to have a guy on staff that has, lived it and walked in the shoes that our players are walking in each day, and did it to the highest degree and the highest level possible. And he's a great guy too. I mean, you talk about our staff, we have an unbelievable staff of awesome elite humans, that I get to go to work with every day, and very thankful. I think that's one of the biggest things too. Like when you look at college football, not a whole lot of times people stick around together, and so to have the continuity and the consistency within our staff over the course of 3 years, it's been really awesome to see, and really awesome to work, to be a part of. And then, like I said, you find that fifth guy that adds, hey, this is the final piece of the puzzle, to make a well-rounded staff that does an unbelievable job of coaching and taking care of our players. From a top to bottom standpoint. I think that's been, for me at least, come to Iowa State since January, that's been awesome. It's been really fun. We've had a really good year so far, and I'm really thankful for it.
Awesome. Yeah. I think something I really like you brought up is that, you've got your own individual thing that you need to focus on with football. And that's one thing I noticed at Purdue. Like when I interned, I was usually there with the skills group. So I was with quarterbacks, punters. Sometimes they'd put the wideouts and the cornerbacks in there with them as well. Then you'd have, a separate group of interns and a coach with your linemen and your bigs. And then you'd have kind of your bigger skill running backs, fullbacks, linebackers, and a separate group. And then you'd have the other group, which would kind of be like the banged up crowd, guys that either had surgery, aren't playing this week, academic trouble, whatever it is. You got a separate group. Here with them, and then that's kind of how basically the weight room rolled for 4 days a week, plus your conditioning and what have you. And I think the other thing I like too is that I think that if you're interested in collegiate, finding what you're really passionate about, if you want to do it like the football level, like if you're passionate about the weight room part, then still got to have a good understanding of all strength and conditioning, but have something that you're really hyper focused on. That way, if you want to join a football staff, you can be a major piece to that overall puzzle. And if you're somebody that's really into the conditioning side, or you're really into the metrics, I'm sure Iowa State, you guys got somebody running all your numbers with GymAware. And you guys use GymAware, I'm guessing?
No, we've so in the weight room we just have Tendos, but on the field we have Catapult. Brandon Piatzek he's the one that takes the lead on all that. Very intelligent individual, does an unbelievable job, with that, and within what we do on the field. Very smart guy, but he's a good coach too. And that's kind of the cool thing too, is that when you look at, it's kind of, you're talking like you might have like a certain niche where it's like, hey, like, you're going to be like, hey, like you bring this piece of the puzzle, and then, another guy brings this, and so forth. And it's like across the staff, like, do we bring certain deals to the table? Absolutely. But when you look at it, all of us can coach on the field. All of us can coach in the weight room. If we have some modifications, we can all handle it. Like, and I think that's one of the biggest, a big strength of ours as a staff, is that there's not a coach on our staff that can't coach something that we have on paper that we ask our players to do. So as far as that goes, I mean, we all trust each other. We know everyone is more than capable, of getting the job done, regardless of what the task may be. So, with the way kind of we're talking a minute ago, just about kind of how we split things, like, how things are split up. And and that's kind of nice too, is like we'll have typically in this, the winter and the summer, we'll have like our line group, we'll have our combo group, then we'll have our skill group. And then from there, it's, if we have some guys that may have some internships, guys that may have class conflicts, and it's like, okay, well, what do you do? And you've got a group of skill players that are going to be running, we're looking, 60, 70 yard tempos, but then you've got, a group of linemen that play in a, 5-10 yard box, they don't really get up to, top end speed or whatever. The cases don't really cover as much yardage. So it's like, well, how do you do that when you look at the different dynamics that may, go on within just a single training session, whether it's on the field or in the weight room? Even the weight room is a lot more general than what's going to go on the field. How do you plan for that and still get it done at a high degree? I think, again, having a staff that is well-rounded, that can coach anything that we have on paper, we're going to ask our guys to do, but also having a really organized plan of how we're going to go about that. It makes the day go a lot smoother. The training's a lot more effective, and the players see that too. They say, hey, this is a staff that they know what's going on. They understand what the deal is. they can handle multiple things at one time. Like they're on their game, they're dialed in. So again, that's just kind of something that the players can see. But not very, very fortunate to have the staff that we have here.
Awesome. And then I guess next big thing, which me and you chop it up probably the most about, is conjugate training.
Yeah.
And kind of explain. I mean, I definitely know you're using it at San Jose and Boise, and now at Iowa State. I guess kind of walk us through. You don't have to necessarily go through a whole year, but how you as a coach are thinking about how you're laying that training out for your football guys, especially now with the season approaching. This is the hectic time of year for both you guys and the players, coaching staff. I mean, every week it's a big question mark in terms of who's available, what training needs to happen, whether guys are seeing playing time or not. So I guess can you kind of walk us through what, your conjugate layout that you use for Iowa State kind of looks like?
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as, kind of looking at the X's and O's. So when we got here, we hadn't seen these guys train. I think like that's kind of one of those deals when you get to a new spot and you start to think, we're going to do all this, do all that. It's like, well, just pump the brakes. Let's see how they handle, just a like bench squat. If you're going to do an Olympic movement, like a clean or a snatch or a jerk, whatever, like that's a really good time. Okay, cool. Break this thing down and start to look at, hey, do we do, above the knee work, below the knee work? Do we start with a clean pull? Like, do we start with, just like a bar complex, whatever? So I think for us, that was what we did when we got there. It was like, hey, like, what does this look like when we get, whenever we get up into week one? And our guys had a pretty good chunk of time off. There wasn't a bowl game last year, so they had been training for about 4 weeks, away from the facility before that, before we all got there. So when we started, it was like, hey, let's program some very basic things. I think the first when we looked at really, so when we sit down and we look at kind of what we want to do, the biggest thing when you look like from winter to spring ball, you got to look at how much time do you have available to train. And so we looked at, okay, we have 8 weeks to train. Awesome. What can we do in these 8 weeks from like you're looking at max effort, looking at dynamic effort, like what can we do to one, get a gauge on where the guys are at physically, what they look like in the weight room, how do they bench, how do they squat, what does the movement quality look like? And then we can start to at least get some loose numbers to maybe start to go off of. Two, it's okay, what do we have available? What do we feel like we need to slowly integrate and expose them to, as far as different bars, maybe a box or something like that, maybe like pins, reverse bands, or dynamic work, whether we're going to use chain, we're going to use band. Like if we're going to put in some movements like sumo deads or like block pulls, whatever that might look like, we're going to get on the inverse curls. We've got eight inverse curls from Westside in our weight room that we're on often. Absolutely love those pieces. So again, I think the biggest thing when we sit down and look at, and what we did was when we got here, it was 8 weeks to train. What do we feel most comfortable with? And so what we did was we broke it down into bi-weekly rotations with the main movement. So what we did was we went the first week where we would go, hey, we're just going to bench. Like we need to see these guys. What does it look like? And so that gave us an opportunity to teach it the way we want to teach it, correct issues as they come up. And then two, we started record some loose numbers. Now we have some values to start to go off of where we can start to help kind of guide our players, through their working sets and kind of where some of those jumps may need to go on open sets. So what we did on an upper half standpoint, we rolled the first 2 weeks, just straight up bench. We rolled week 1 sets of 5, week 2 sets of 3. Then we rotated out to a multi-grip bar, same range of motion. Now I just changed the grip up a little bit, a little more of a challenging bar to press with, a little more shoulder friendly. So same deal. We rolled, hey, we're going to roll 5s, we're going to roll 3s. And then that right there, 4 weeks of training. Week 5, we pulled back and we did almost like a deload, because when we thought about it, it was like, well, you got all these dudes training from 4 weeks. By the time you get up there, I mean, you get that 5th week, that's like 9 weeks of straight training. Like you're going to put together 12 weeks straight without any, without like a down week, just let them kind of catch their breath before we get ready to go on spring break and then spring ball. So when we kind of looked at it, was once we got to week 5, we would work some doubles at like 70, 75 of the working max that we had for the guys, just off the numbers and the work that we had seen up until that point. And so what we did there was, okay, let's let them kind of catch their breath. And then week 6 was that sweet spot where we felt good as a staff. Cool. Now, like, we'll take some singles on the bench. We'll take some singles on the squat. And then we looked at week 7 and 8 before we got a break. And then going into spring ball, we said, hey, what do we need to do? What kind of movements do we need to put in here now that we were going to look at using during spring practice, when now you throw football in the equation and stress is high, activity's high. It's nowhere near as dense as a fall camp, but still, I mean, you're adding another piece of the puzzle into it.
Yep.
And, the last, 2 weeks, week 7 and 8, we started to have, 6 a.m. workouts, as a team, which they were a lot of fun. Just a lot of competitive drills, and it was just a lot of fun to get everybody together in that environment. So, it was an awesome, 4 workouts that we had. But again, like, you look at places that do, like, what you call mat drills or, morning workouts, and it's like, okay, well, how do you account for this new stressor that gets thrown in? And it's like, okay, cool. Like, it's coming. Don't complain about it. Find a way to still get the job done, with the time available, and then kind of get an idea. Okay, let's see what this looks like, on a, Wednesday morning or a Friday morning. Let's kind of see how we think this is going to affect, training down through the end of the week and subsequently in the subsequent weeks before we get ready to go, for a week of spring break and then into spring ball. So that was really what we looked at on, from a max effort upper standpoint, max effort lower. We followed a similar template. We back squatted for 2 weeks. We put our safety bars in for 2 weeks, and wild enough, we found that our guys actually squatted just as well, if not better, on our safety bars than they did with a straight bar. And I've seen the safety bars from powerlift, but they're a little different. The weight sits a little bit lower. It almost feels like a little bit of a rackable camber bar with handles, almost like a spider bar, but not as unforgiving as that bar. I think it's terrible. So we rolled with that for 2 weeks. Again, fives and threes. We took doubles on that down week on week 5. And then we took singles on the back squat on week 6. And that was just I thought that was a really smart, intelligent way to go about it. And then that gave us our numbers that we could at least go off of now. Once we would, program max or plan max effort work, we would plan dynamic work. Now, okay, we're going off of some legitimate, training values that our guys have hit. We're not just going off, oh, this is what your rep max says it is, So anyway, that's how we rolled it. Whenever we roll our max effort work, through the first 8 weeks. And then whenever you get into, spring practice or even fall camp to that extent, and that's kind of one of the cool things about, Conjugate. And I spoke about this a little bit at the national conference, CSCCa conference in Orlando in May, is that where Conjugate will have an opportunity to shine for you is, say you get up into a really, highly competitive year, and, fall camp hits or spring ball hits, and now the pads come on, and you've got guys, elbows are kind of beat up, shoulders are a little beat up, like, hands and wrists, kind of like, hips, knees, whatever. Because at the end of the day, football is a collision sport. It's a physical game. And to sit there and say, oh, our guys are going to feel great all the time, like, you're lying to yourself. So, but what can you do as a strength and conditioning professional with the tools that you have available to yourself, within the weight room to use? What can you do, from like a partial range of motion standpoint to one, take care of the guys, but two, at the same time, be able to drive strength and train that quality and push it in the direction that it needs to go. So, because you're going to be asked to train through those periods. Doesn't mean you need to pull back, completely and barely touch anything. No, not at all. But I think that's where you need to be a lot more thoughtful and a lot more, careful, I think, as far as the movements that you do pick, and kind of the order and training that it goes. So, like, whenever we get up into like our really high density periods of practice, well, that's when we'll bring out like our shoulder savers. We may end up going to a floor press. We may end up getting, get our safety bars back out, get our boxes out. We've got buffalo bars on every single rack, so maybe early on in a camp period or like an in-season period, that might be like, hey, we can at least still get a bar in their back, but we can get one. We have access to a bar that's going to be a lot more shoulder, wrist, and elbow friendly, especially even more friendly to some guys that might be a little more bound up in the shoulders. That's a really easy bar to implement. The guys seem to like it pretty well. So, it just gives us a chance to rotate different pressure points and try to take care of the major joints that get beat up, during a competitive season or, like a camp period. So, really, that's as far as like your winter and your spring. That's kind of what that looked like. We've got the month of May off, and then when we went up into summer, that's where we're going to see volume on the field go up substantially, because we're trying to match, a 4 to 5 day camp average of, 4 different metrics that we're looking at, on our Catapult GPS units, to make sure that we can handle that our players can handle the demands of camp. So as one goes up, one's got to start to come down a little bit, right? So what we did in the summer is, and we did this last year at Boise, and to me, it made a lot of sense, where our first year at Boise, we took some efforts, at the end of summer. When you look at the totality of 8 weeks of training in the summer leading up into a camp period, that's a lot. Like, that's a lot of stress and volume, and that's a lot of fatigue. And so, did we take some efforts at the end of that? Yes, we did. And was it bad? No, not at all. I mean, I thought our players did really well. But we thought about, it's like, well, maybe there's a better, more effective way to go about this, to where our guys would have a better opportunity to display their strength, and not have 3 to 4 extra weeks of stress and volume and yardage, on their body. So we kind of looked at, okay, well, let's look at summer. Where's the 4th of July break? Within, as far as like week by week, what days does that typically fall? What days does that fall? And, within the respective year that we're in. And so what we did last year was, we would train 4 weeks, and on that 5th week, right before, it's like, hey, it's a half week, very short week, we're going to go up into the 4th break, and then we're going to come back for about 2.5 to 3 more weeks at the end. We went ahead and took our efforts there, and it was a lot better result. We felt numbers were better, guys and feels beat up. We're like, okay, cool, this is pretty effective. And so we did the same thing this last year, to where now, instead of running, tri-weekly, bi-weekly rotations of movements, we rotated movements every week. And so where we started like heavy 5s, 4s, 3s, we did a deload on the doubles with reverse bands. Then we took singles on the bench and squat. The bench, we didn't necessarily go over, like, we didn't try to set a new like PR or anything. Like, hey, we're too close to camp, we're too close to the season. We felt we could take a squat, but we played it safe. We went around between 90 and 95 on the bench, and the guys hammered it. I mean, they handled it absolutely fine. But I think when you look at what we did on the upper standpoint, we went, if I recall, multi-grip for 5. We did a close grip for 3. We did a 2-board or a shoulder saver bench for, multi-grip for 5, close grip for 4, shoulder saver for 3. We did a deload with reverse. I say deload. We used some reverse bands. We let them touch 90, but we used reverse bands on the bench and squat too. We did one single at 90. Hey, touch it, get it in your hands, get on your back, boom, be done. And they handled that very well. And then we took singles on that. What would be that 5th week? It was a short week, because we broke, I believe, on Thursday through Thursday. The guys had a little bit of time off for the 4th. So we basically did that. We took singles on that 5th week. On the squat, I believe we went front squat for 5s, safety bar for 4s. We did buffalo bar for 3s, straight bar reverse bands for 1, and then we just went right up into that single on that same week, right before the 4th. And so we felt like that was a really effective way to go about it. It was safe, it was controlled. Guys absolutely hammered it. It was a really good period of training. So that was also when we took some singles on a power clean too, because we've been kind of working that a little bit through the course of the winter and spring. You've got spring ball. You're probably not going to try to catch anybody when you start to get the pads on and shoulders and shoulders, wrists, and elbows. That doesn't feel great. So, we still kept in clean pulls and whatnot with straight bars. Now we're using the trap bars. We just got 18 new trap bars. So that's been a really big help. But so we used that, during that period. But then once we got into the summer, we thought, hey, now we're technically proficient enough at this. We feel good with taking some singles and at least have a little bit of a better idea of kind of what the guys can handle on an individual basis. So now, like I said, when we start to, plan and program percentage-based things out, now we've got a little clearer, a little better roadmap for our guys to follow, and we can help guide them a little bit more. So, so that was what we did on week 5. And then once we got into week 7, 8, it really week 6, 7, and 8, we were just working triples, doubles, singles, trying to make sure, hey, we're still touching the strength quality. We're still hitting 80% or better on all those main movements. And we held that actually really well up in through camp. And I'll be honest, man, like, we have awesome players. Our kids love to train, and it makes our job a lot easier too. In the weight room, the energy is always great, even if it's like been a long, hot day of practice. The guys come in, like, we just had our second in-season lift, last night, and we had 2 big groups, and we had another group of, guys that had class conflicts. and they came in and absolutely pounded it. But kind of what we're looking at now, once we get up into season, is different because you've got two different groups. You got your travel, you got your non-travel. And the good thing is right now is like we're kind of in the midst of, we've got like loosely, here's our travel group, here's our non-travel, but we have so much competition on our team. It's like there could be some guys that are on the non-travel that could very well, work their way into, be on the travel squad, which is a really good thing, really good problem to have. So what we're kind of looking at in season with our non-travel, I'll start with our travel group. So CSCCa hits, and I get done talking, and kind of one of the cool things about the opportunity to speak, and talk to different coaches is to, as much as they're, going to your presentation to, hopefully find something, beneficial and find something useful. And I think if you're a presenter and you're speaking and you're not trying to engage, maybe afterwards, or try to, talk to some coaches after the, after that period of time is gone. I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And so, I'm talking with, one of the coaches, that was at, at the presentation at the talk, Power 5 coach down in the SEC, and him and I were chatting, and we were, I was asking him about, or he asked me a little bit about in season, kind of like how we'd run it, the last couple of years, and I asked him, like, what do you guys do, and kind of what is that structure, what does that layout look like? Because we just started to get force plates, force decks from Valve. We've got 3 of those now in our weight room, and so that was kind of something he talked about, how they'll go, speed strength on week 1, strength speed week 2, then absolute week 3, and rotate it back. And kind of looking at the numbers on the force plate, they were trending in a positive direction for the majority of the group. I'm like, oh, that's kind of, interesting. So for me, that just really struck a chord. It's, because I feel like we, at the end of the day, what we do in season, Phil, is very effective. But, at the end of the day, as a coach, you're always trying to find ways that maybe can I make this a little bit better here? Can I make a change here? Can I do this? What can, is there a better way, or is there, a more effective way to maybe do this? And so that really got the gears turning. So what we'll kind of look at, during this in-season period with our travel group is where we'll look at it in 4 weeks at a time. So week 1 will be a speed strength emphasis on both bench and squat. Week 2 will be a strength speed emphasis on our bench and squat. Week 3 is going to be accelerative strength. Week 4 absolute, and then we'll rotate it back around. And so we'll bump our starting percentage up about 5%. Based off the feedback that we get over the course of 4 weeks. If like, hey, we feel good moving up a little bit, or it's like, no, we need to kind of repeat, stay where we're at, depending on fatigue of the guys, how the season's going, what does that all look like? What does practice look like? What is the volume? What does the totality of a week look like for our guys now that you have the stress of a game introduced? Then that will help us make a call. But that's kind of where our heads are at right now. And the cool thing is, we'll have an opportunity to use our force plates every Sunday. So that way it can kind of give us an idea of, hey, here's where the group is trending. Are we in a good spot? Yes. Let's keep rolling while we're rolling. Do we notice a negative trend? Okay, cool. Let's look at what's on paper, and let's see how maybe, what could very well be causing this. And if that is, something that's going on, with, that we can handle in the weight room, that we can help fix. So we'll use those metrics to kind of say, hey, where are we trending in the right direction? Cool. Let's keep rolling. If not, what kind of changes can we make, to kind of what we're doing? And then what we'll do is, kind of the thought is when we're rolling, lighter loads for, higher bar speed, higher velocity, we'll use some full range of motion movements. And once we start to get some accelerated work, we start to get some absolute work. Cool. We'll pull out like our buffalo bars, our safety bars, boxes, our boards. We'll use a floor press, a lot of different partials, partial movements that we'll use to make sure, like we talked earlier, you want to try to save the major joints. They get banged on in season, in camp, in practice, but at the same time, still like find a way to still push strength, in the right direction. And then and that's like really with our main work. As far as the accessory work, we'll still try to find, very low cost, high return on investment exercises that we can still move at we can still implement at a fairly high volume. Like face pulls, shrugs, rear, reverse pec decks, any kind of rear delt trap work, mid upper back work, bi tri work. We'll start to look at some different deals, there, maybe we'll still train our neck twice a week. We've got 10 neck machines within our weight room that, 4-week flexion extension, lateral flexion, great pieces. It's also got a shrug attachment on it too. So if you wanted to, roll between, regular shrug, single arm shrug, if you want to load it up pretty well, you can do that too. We've got a lot of options within our room. I think that's one of the more, impressive and more beneficial parts of the room that we work in is the amount of options we have. So when, very high stress periods do come, and it goes far beyond just, oh, you just got to bench and squat and maintain your strength. It's like college ball is different than high school. I mean, let's not get it twisted. Like, you look at some of these guys that are 280, 300 plus that can absolutely run and are incredibly athletic. I mean, until like whenever you're down on a field at one of those games, I mean, the speed and the violence of the game it's impressive. I mean, it is scary to watch sometimes. So having all the different options we have available to our players is absolutely critical, not only for our job, but for their health and well-being, during the competitive season. So that's kind of what we'll do. We'll keep a lot of, certain things in our program, like neck. We'll still do our weighted chins. Like, we'll still train the hamstring, whether it's an inverse curl or we use an RDL. So we get one that's a little more knee dominant, one that's a little more hip dominant. And that way we can kind of rotate, each week between what we do so we don't get stale. We'll still find ways to train major areas of the body, but we'll do it in a very smart, thoughtful, and intelligent, way to make sure that we're not detracting from what the main focus is right now. And that's the 12 guaranteed Saturdays that we have, for our players to go out and compete. But that's the travel. So the non-travel, and this is something we did last year that I thought was very effective. And we're going to run a similar approach, is that we essentially will take a 5-3-1 rep scheme and we'll use the 90% training max, but we'll rotate the movements every fourth week. And so our non-travel will have an opportunity to train 3 to 4 days a week. And so what we'll do is within, say on week one, say if we're going to go, hey, we're going to floor press and we're going to buffalo bar squat. Those are going to be our two main max effort movements on the upper and lower half. Awesome. So we'll go the first week on both those movements. We'll go a 3x5 to where it's that 75, 80, 85, instead of being like, hey, we're going to go 5+ on that last set. We'll cap it at 5 to 8. And then what we'll do is on the second week, we'll keep the same movements. So we'll wave it down. Now we're going to go 3x3. So now we'll go 80, 85, 90. And instead of being a 3+, we'll go 3 to 6. We'll cap it at 6. And then we'll rotate around that third week. We'll go 5 at 85, 3 at 90. And then we'll go 1+. That 1+ at 95 is going to be like a 1 to 3 or 1 to 4, depending on how we feel as a staff that, our guys are prepared to handle based off practice demands and what the week has kind of given us. So, and then once we hit that fourth week, we'll rotate the movements out, and then we'll go back to the 3x5 at the same percentages. And so, when you sit down and you look at it, that lays out a really clean and a very, easily organized, 3-4 week blocks, or 4 week waves, I guess, of training that will last the entire season. And so that was something we did last year that we felt was very effective and we really enjoyed. It was a lot of fun to watch those guys progress and really start to, really enjoy training. And we thought it was very, very effective. Guys got stronger through the season, movement quality improved tenfold. And then a lot of those young guys, they gained a whole lot of confidence. So whenever we got ready to go, the goal is when you get up into a non-travel group that's not going to play much and you're going to be servicing a lot throughout the week, and you may not get any reps on Saturday, that's fine. But understand, like, their role is incredibly important to the overall success of the team, because those guys are going to be the ones that are going to be giving you great looks, in walkthrough periods, in live periods, team periods, wherever the case is, through practice. So you take the time to develop all those guys. I mean, the rising tide raises all ships. That can only make our 1s and 2s and the guys that are going to be playing on Saturday and the ones that are going to be counted on to go win games. That can make their days a lot more effective, and they can get better looks and they can get better reps at practice. And now we have a better opportunity as a whole to go have success on Saturday. And I think that's a really kind of, when you look at the developmental group, like the non-travel group, like that's a very overlooked, piece of the puzzle where, some places and we'll be like, oh, we just got to, we got to gut these guys. We got to put them through some hard things. Like, well, you can make training difficult, but at the same time, you can also make it effective, and you can push, hard towards your end goal in a very difficult, but a very smart and thought out process and way of going about that. So, and then with this group too, because we'll have a couple more days than we had in the last couple of years, we'll go ahead and just jump in our regular dynamic effort waves, where we'll keep it 40, 45, 50. We'll just use chain. We're not going to use band in a high stress period like this. So we'll use chain weight. We'll save the band for whenever we get up into, winter and spring, and then ultimately summer next year. So I don't know, I just spoke for like maybe 12 minutes straight.
That's good.
It's good. Okay.
Yeah, I think the first question that I had for you off of that was talking about some of the weightlifting variants. So, do you guys prefer to do are you guys doing your weightlifting movements on your max effort days? You do them on your dynamic effort days? Are you doing, two different variations, one on each day where one's a little heavier, one's a little more for speed? I guess, kind of go into depth a little bit on the weightlifting side. I think that's
Yeah,
probably when you look at Conjugate, I think that's probably the big question mark. You'll have like, well,
yeah.
I'm going to use a weightlifting variant. Where do I put it? Or do I just ignore it completely and expect to get my triple extension from, jumps or on field work, like you said? I guess kind of just how you guys use your clean, considering you definitely brought that up.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, so when we look at kind of where we would want to put it on, I mean, there's a thought of, because again, we're conjugate in the weight room, and you look at the system used on the field, we look at a high-low CNS model, within our field work, right? And so you look, Charlie Francis talked about, you got to make your high days high, make your low days low. That's that whole thought process. Like, okay, great. At the same time, like we looked at, again, we talk a lot about the totality of a day and then into a week, and so it's like, okay, cool. Like, what does the totality of a week look like if we're going to ask our guys to get some efforts on the clean, and then we're going to ask them to get some efforts on the squat, and then we're going to ask them to get some efforts on like a heavy, like a fairly heavy RDL for like sets of 3 to 5. Like that's going to be, I understand, like we understand keeping your days, keep your high days high, keep your low days low, but we're kind of sitting there looking at like, God, that's like that, bucketing your stressors, like that's a lot to ask of our guys in one day. Could they handle it? Absolutely. We have some dudes in the weight. We have some dudes on this team, man, and a lot of them. But what can we do as a staff that might be, be in a little bit more of their favor, I guess, for lack of a better term, for nothing else to call it, but what could be a little more beneficial to them in the long run. So when we look at how we laid out our Olympic movements, so we would go on Monday would be a low CNS day, and that's going to be our max effort upper day in the weight room. We look at Tuesday. Tuesday is going to be our first like high CNS, but we're going to be max velocity on the field. That's going to be a dynamic effort upper. So there's not, dynamic effort lower. So there's not going to be anything from a lower standpoint that's going to be, super heavy, super intense. So this would be a really good opportunity if we have, we look at the Olympic movements, what day would allow us to push some intensity on that and would probably make the most sense. We put it early in the week on that Tuesday, because that's probably in the weight room, that would probably be the most taxing thing they do. Like dynamic effort squats, they like D squats, our guys eat it up. They absolutely hammer it. Our big guys, whenever they pull, they hit some sumo deads on the ground versus chainer band, like they eat that up too, like no problem. But what can we do from an intensity standpoint? A movement that's going to still have more speed qualities and strength qualities. What can we do, to be able to push some intensity on that, push intent there, but at the same time, like not ask our guys to do a crazy amount of work just from a sheer intensity standpoint in the weight room. So we put it in there on a Tuesday, seemed to work really well. And then when we would cycle back through on that Friday would be so Tuesday would be, high CNS on the field, velo, and then DE lower with the heavy clean on Tuesday. Wednesday would be off. Thursday, we would go into another low CNS on the field. So that's going to be in more tempo runs. We'll get some submax change direction work, which those days turn into some pretty difficult days too on the field now. But then we would go up into the weight room. That'd be our DE upper. And then we would go into on Friday would be our next high CNS day on the field. That'll be max excel work. Then we paired that up with our max effort lower. And so now we're looking at, hey, now, okay, we've got, we look at both sides of, you've got, at least from an Olympic movement or like a jumping movement, you've got, something that you feel, hey, like, again, you look at movements that are going to have way more speed quality and strength quality. Here's one that we can push some intensity on. Here's one that we feel we need a lot more velocity on. So that's where we would put in like loaded jumps, on that day. So whether it be like a, hey, weighted box jump, like a squat jump, a trap bar jump, like whatever, that's where we would kind of put that there. So that way we're still driving intent. We're getting the training quality we need that we're trying to get on that particular day. But at the same time, we've not asked our guys to do like, hey, a heavy clean, heavy squat, heavy RDL. And now all of a sudden you are absolutely cooked, and you might put your guys in a hole so bad that, by the time Tuesday rolls around, depending on how the weekend goes, and how Monday goes, they might still not be out of that hole. So that's when we look at the Olympic movements, and we don't do, again, we really catch once a day. With our skill and our combo, our line guys would, we would look at above the knee or below the knee hang clean. We did primarily above the knee work, with those guys on that Friday. And again, it was a much lighter load, still working practicing to catch. But again, bar speed was the main thing on that. So, again, that's hopefully that answers the question, like how we laid that out and why we laid it out the way we did.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you briefly just touched on it, but I was curious on what you guys are doing with the deadlift. Sounds like you guys are doing some speed pulls. Are you guys have your guys pull heavy out of season anytime, or do you mainly get most of your, I want to say, heavy, quote unquote, heavy pulling from your cleans and just keep with speed from the floor? I guess speak on your guys' deadlifts a little bit in terms of how you guys run that.
Yeah. So really, when we look at, like with the deadlift, we looked at more so, and again, I'll kind of go back to kind of what we thought, as a staff, is like, and you hear people talk all the time with, oh, this guy is really strong in the weight room, but he sucks at football. Like, if you got a team of guys that are really good in the weight room, but when it comes time to actually get between the paint and play, not so good. It's like, we just got a really bad team full of a lot of strong guys, so they didn't really do a whole lot of good when it's time to play. So, but when you look at, and again, we didn't do this with our skill and combo, mainly we just did it with our line guys. And here's why, is that when you look at that part of the game, when you look at O&D linemen and what goes on in the trenches, and even you can make the, the argument too for like your linebackers, your running backs, like wide receivers, you can make an argument for anybody, but football is a game of leverage. And so if you can use leverage to manipulate and move another human being from point A to point B in your favor, you will have a pretty good chance of having success on any, given play. And so when we looked at it, it's like, okay, well, what can we do instead of just doing this for the sake of, speed, rate of force development? What can we do, that, like, how can we implement this to where, hey, like this will have some carryover to our guys? And so that's when we looked at the deadlift of, hey, let's sumo it. Let's get in a wide base, because when you look at, anyone on the field at any given time, we could be in a very, very wide base. And if you don't train out there, you're going to be holding your breath, when you guys do get out that wide, and, hope to God that nothing happens. So we looked at, hey, this is a position our guys could very well get in. But when you look at the best pullers in the world, and that's been the cool thing training out, where I've trained the last, couple of years, especially, training over at Thirst and then training out at Boss Barbell, watching some of the best lifters in the world, especially Dan Green and Andrew Herbert and those guys, and Christy Hawkins out in, California, watching them deadlift. I mean, you're looking 700 to 900 pounds on the bar, and, but early on in their warm-up sets where they got, 4, 5, 6 on, they understand how to manipulate their body and wedge and leverage themselves against the weight to where that bar will start to float. And so when you look at, oh, that's someone who understands leverage and understands how to use it to move, another load or manipulate a load and move it where they want to move it, right? So I'm thinking, okay, that's essentially moving another human being off the line of scrimmage, right? And so we looked at what the sumo deadlift could teach us and how it could benefit our big guys. And so we looked at, developing using leverage to your benefit, and also being able to get in a very wide base and build some strength and build some capacity out there. At the same time too, that's a really low cost way to target lower back, glutes, hips, hamstrings, right? Adductors, really easy, effective way to knock that out and get that done. So, and also too, like that was the biggest thing we looked at it. What else can help us with that? And this is something we did last year at Boise. We started doing some Zercher work off the pins with our guys. So we would start to do some Zercher pin squats to where, we'll start it up a little bit, maybe a notch higher than what it needed to be on, the first 2 weeks, let our guys kind of feel it. And we primarily stuck between like 40 to 60% of their back squat max. Not necessarily worried about moving a whole lot of weight on that. It's more so, hey, like manipulate your body, use leverage to move this weight until you get you get a lot of trunk work, a lot of postural work. You get a lot of, indirect work in the mid and upper back. Anyone that's spent time doing a Zercher squat or a Zercher carry knows how challenging it is for that part of those areas of the body. It sucks. It's pretty hard, especially you go for, time or, high volume, or you get some load in your hand, or load up in your, in your arms. So, but that was kind of the biggest thing. We almost looked at the sumo dead and the Zercher work almost kind of one and the same, to where, hey, it's leverage. Know how to use your leverage and wedge yourself against this load to get it to go where you want it to go. And then again, what we did with the Zercher work is we started to get to the point with our big guys, we started to stagger their stance up. So more like a pass set with our old line. And so we would essentially we had 2 weeks of just, hey, straight up, like just a regular stance. And then we got to the point, okay, cool. Now we're going to wave it back down to like 40 or 50%. And now we're going to start doing some staggered stance work and think about it in the sense of, hey, we're getting ready to get up into a pass set. We're sitting in our stance, or this might be a position where I may engage somebody in. So again, your strength is going to be built where it's trained. And so we figured that was a really easy, effective way where we can get our guys in some positions where they might find themselves in on game day. So we can help start to build some strength and some confidence out in those areas. So that was what we would do from a secondary standpoint, with our O&D linemen. So again, that's kind of when we looked at the sumo dead, and we looked at the Zercher work. It's all leverage and how to use it, how to manipulate a load to move it to where you want to go. So now we can maybe hopefully have some transference whenever game day rolls around.
Awesome. And then the last thing you spoke about there too earlier was the force plates. Are you guys just tracking metric on that on particular players, like with your starters and maybe some of your twos, or how are you guys using the force plate metrics? Obviously you're tracking to see if things are improving or not, but I guess what personnel are you using that data to make those decisions?
So maybe right now we've jumped everybody just so we've only jumped we've only jumped a handful of times. So we just got them at the end of summer. So like we got up into like end of summer, be in through camp. We'll get a chance to start doing that every Sunday on a consistent basis, but we at least did enough to where we got a baseline on everybody. Just kind of see here's what we're working with from the jump. Here's the baseline metric. And so that way now we've got something to reference back whenever we get into the season. And we'll get our first jump on, coming up on, or actually we got them on Sunday. So we get our second one coming up after our game against Northern Iowa on Saturday. So we'll have a chance to get week 2 and kind of see what that looks like. So yeah, we'll just do it on Sundays. Right now we've jumped everyone, but I think probably going forward, if I did bet, I think we'll probably just maybe look at our 1s and 2s and maybe some of our 3s and our guys that play a lot of special teams reps.
Yeah. And I'm assuming you guys are also using catapult in that equation as well, right?
Maybe not necessarily like in that equation, but what we can do if force plates are going down and like, okay, cool, like what's going on, because it could very well be fatigue from the game. It could be fatigue from the week, from travel. There's all sorts of different deals that are going to go up into, what can cause fatigue to a high degree when you especially look at the sport of college football, right? The season's long. These guys they've got practice, but they also have like meetings. They have, lifting. They have, you got to be able to get to meals on time. And most importantly, you have class.
Yeah.
You throw the academic piece in there, and that is a major stressor for a lot of our players, especially the young guys that this is their first time in college, So at the end of the day, like you can kind of look at, with the force plates, what that is giving you, and then what the GPS units, like you look at the catapults, here's what this is giving us. Okay, cool. Like maybe we can start to pinpoint, okay, like maybe this is causing this level of fatigue, maybe this is causing it, whatever. But and too, like you can also turn the mirror on yourself and look, hey, from a strength and conditioning standpoint, in the weight room, is there something that we're missing? If there is, cool, what is it? How do we find that? And then how we move forward, to make sure everything's moving in the right direction. But really at the end of the day, you can use them to kind of essentially say like, they're one and the same, but that's just another way you can measure, hey, okay, like our guys shot, our guys in a good spot. Yes. Cool. No. Okay. Why? And that might be something you could look back on, like, hey, maybe this could be, a reason why, or what have you. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. I guess I should have said they coincide a little bit more.
Yeah, they do.
It's obviously this is really low on their force plate data that day, and their catapult GPS data is through the roof.
Yeah.
You're kind of looking at, okay, it's kind of correlating towards playing time, or they're hitting how many. I mean, obviously they could also track how many times you're hitting 80%, 90% velo. Obviously the more you're hitting those velos, the more stressful you're going to start to see those guys have on Saturdays, and it's all kind of correlated together. So it's just cool to see how you guys are implementing some of that sports science piece to ultimately drive your decisions for your your guys that are playing on Saturdays. So,
oh yeah, and our sports medicine staff, they help us out with that too. Like they're a very important part of the sports science aspect within like our NORD boards, our force plates, like everything that we look at within Catapult too. I mean, they're a tremendous resource, and they're all awesome at what they do. So we're really fortunate to have Cobes and Nate and all those guys down there within that staff, and what they do for us and do for our players. They're awesome to work with. So that definitely helps.
for sure. All right, the last thing I got for you, this is kind of look in the future, but you've been in the collegiate ranks now several years, been quite literally almost all over the country at this point. Where does Lucas see collegiate strength and conditioning going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh boy. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, I think the caliber and the quality of coach is going to improve. And I think because you've got the amount, like mainly due to the amount of resources that are out and that are available now, whether you're looking at, the field, the weight room, whatever the case is, the sports science side of things. I mean, you have no choice but to to grow and adapt, because if not, then you're going to get passed up, because there are a lot of younger coaches that are getting exposed to a lot more technology. They're getting exposed to a lot more training methodologies and systems, than I think a lot of us, got exposed to whenever we were really early in our career. So, and I was very fortunate, the time I spent down under Coach Decker at New Mexico State. We ran a lot of different systems in the weight room. Then he gave us a lot of freedom, to run what we felt was most effective and would be, in the best interest of our kids that we coached. But at the same time, like, things had to be done a certain way. So, but I think the biggest thing, yeah, man, like, you're looking at the next 5 to 10 years, that the caliber and the quality of the coach will improve based on the amount of information that is out and available right now at this moment. I mean, if you're a young coach getting in this field, I mean, my goodness, you look at different podcasts, you look at, Instagram, Twitter. I mean, strength coach Twitter can get a little harsh. It's chilled out. It's actually chilled out the last couple of months. I haven't seen a whole lot like I used to, but I mean, yeah, the amount of, with social media, with, Spotify and iTunes and Apple Music, all that, like, with a lot of those podcasts being on those platforms, and you get a chance where you have experienced coaches that have been in the game for a minute, have another chance to talk to coaches that are either experienced and have been in it for a long time, and maybe out of the field for whatever reason, or you got guys that are they're going to talk to people that are currently in the trenches right now, and that are seeing things work in real time. And what are those what are those methodologies? What are those pieces of equipment? Like, what is all this? What's the feedback that you're getting? And so that's that's great. Grounds for awesome conversation and great content, kind of like what we're doing here. So I just think the amount of resources that are available, like, you have no choice but to get better. And if you don't, that's your own fault. So I think, yeah, the quality and the caliber of coach is going to improve drastically. And I think too, when you look at when you look at the whole, and I honestly think this is something where it's like, hey, like, this is where it's going to, trend towards. I think it'll only get better, is that, the amount of time that we spend with our players, we spend a crazy amount of time with the athletes that we coach. And that's been one of the really cool things over the last 3 years, and especially now that we're here at Iowa State, is that we have such a good relationship and good rapport with our players. They're a lot of fun to be around, and I think the more that the better the coach that comes in, that has had more of an opportunity to be exposed to a lot of different things, but at the same time, like, has found a way to use certain things within their own training to create a better experience for themselves. They're going to have no choice but to create a better experience for the teams and athletes that they work with. And that can really help foster, better relationships and give those kids a better experience, in the weight room training with you while they're going through, arguably one of the toughest but most formative, periods of their life. So I think the field's only going to get better. I think a lot of different people in the field, whether they're a part of a major organization or not, are doing a lot of really cool things, to kind of push it forward and make sure that actually does happen. So that's where I think it's going to go.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, the conference realignment stuff, I think, might also kind of push things to be more competitive. I mean, bigger TV deals, that money's going to trickle down to all the staff to some degree. I mean, they're going to want to get the best, and they're going to want to make sure that you guys are compensated for that not only from a recruitment standpoint, but just from a producing standpoint. I mean, they
Oh,
want the best that they can get, and I think that's ultimately a good thing. So I think that's
yeah.
interesting to see.
Yeah, 100%. I think too, like when you start to talk about, because I feel like that's been kind of like the big buzz, like in college football, has been conference realignment and which team's going where. What does this media deal look like? And like it could have very well be good things for the game. Yeah, it could. Or there's some drawbacks. Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
definitely think so. But you're not going to have all good. You're not going to have all bad. There are certain certain parts that are good, certain parts that might be not so beneficial. But I think at the end of the day, when you start to look at all the figures and the numbers and all that, like still don't lose sight. I think people need to keep in mind that like elite, good human beings within the building, within the four walls of your facility, are what's going to make everything run and run it at a good clip and a good pace, and be a really good environment to work in. And I'll say this. Coach Matt Campbell is an elite human being, and I can't say enough good things about him, the environment he's created here at Iowa State over his tenure here, and how enjoyable it is to go to work every day, in that building, and especially do it with elite football coaches, elite strength coaches, an elite head coach, an elite nutrition staff, and an elite sports medicine staff. But at the end of the day, elite human beings within that building. And I think that's one reason why we've been able to have Iowa State's had the success over the course of the last couple of years that we've had, is because we get the right people in the building. And that is first and foremost, whether it's we're bringing a coach on, we're recruiting a player, like whatever, like, is he or she a good person, and will they fit within what we do here? I think that's the biggest thing we'll look at, because we have great men and women in this program, man. And I think that's what really makes everything run and operate to the level it's operated at the last couple of years. So, yeah, very, very fortunate to be where I'm at right now. Very fortunate.
Awesome. Yeah, I've loved seeing it, man. Last thing, I mean, do you have anything else you want to discuss? Anything we glazed over really quickly that you want to elaborate on, or
Uh,
anything else that you want to share?
Not really, man. Not really. It's just it's been a good year. Third year working with Coach Kagi and Brandon and Jalen, and like I said, now we've got Trevor Ryan on our staff, and how awesome it's been to go to work with those guys every day. I know I've said it before, but I can't say it enough, like how much I enjoy going to work with those dudes, every day. And again, being in the position that we're all in right now, we're very fortunate, and we've had a really good year of training. We're ready to see our kids play, man. We're ready to see our players go get after it. We've been going against each other now, spring ball and then fall camp and all that. And aside from, those camp periods, been a lot of lifting, a lot of running, a lot of training. So, it's college football is here. I mean, there's some games on the TV right now, and our first opportunity is going to be on Saturday. So we're really excited. We're really looking forward to it. We're really excited to go watch our guys, go play and have success. So we're really excited to go watch those guys play here.
Yeah, I love it, man. I know me and Adrian will be watching for you on TV, being the get back guy. And I definitely know that we're definitely going to try to get over to see you at some point.
Yeah,
Definitely,
yeah.
that's been discussed. It's just a matter of figuring out when we can get away. So,
Yeah,
and
you
obviously,
guys
we know you're busy too, so we got to try to also make it work around football schedule too. But
No, you guys need to come. You're welcome anytime, man. And big thanks for having me on today, man. This is, we did this once before, and back, I mean, my God, I think I was at San Jose State whenever we did this the first time, I think.
yeah,
And
yep.
just kind of, it's a lot of fun. You've been a really good friend. You've been a really good mentor, from afar, and someone that I've turned to, several times. Whether it's my own training, like some thoughts I've got, to put on paper to help with the teams I'm responsible for, like. I always give you credit. You're the main catalyst for my understanding of Conjugate and kind of what that looks like, especially now within the team setting too. And because at the end of the day, I mean, that was one of the big reasons why Coach Kagi and I linked up in the first place, is we had the same thought process as far as what training should look like, especially in a team setting. And I don't know if I wouldn't have gone to Thirst if I would have stumbled upon it like I did and had the development I got from you, all these years ago. So, which feels like, going on 5, almost 6 years, which is kind of wild to think. But,
Yeah, it is.
how fast that time is gone. But I appreciate you, man. You've been a great friend. You've been a great resource, a great mentor. I can't thank you enough. So thank you.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, man. Good luck on Saturday. Thanks for jumping on the call. And if anyone's got questions, I'll have all of Lucas's information in the show notes. I'll tag him on Instagram, all that. Definitely reach out to him. He's a good resource. If you have any interest in getting into collegiate strength and conditioning, he's a good guy to follow. Thanks for coming on, Lucas.
Thanks, man. Go Cyclones.
Yep.